Good afternoon, Meredith Anderson coming at you from my home studios. Yeah, it's kind of like 2020. I've tested positive for COVID, full transparency here. But because of the technology advancements we made during COVID, I can bring you a live news conference that just happened moments ago. It wrapped up on Fort Gordon. Senator Jon Ossoff was here to personally oversee the unit by unit inspections that started on post housing at Fort Gordon. Want to share those remarks with you that just wrapped up. Take a listen.
Live on RDW already. Well, thank you so much for joining me here at Fort Gordon this afternoon. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to General Stanton and Colonel Evans and the command staff here for welcoming me back on post and for their leadership at this installation. The men and women who serve here at Fort Gordon do work that is vital to our national security. And they deserve to live in safe and healthy housing. I came here today to ensure that the Army is making good on its commitment, a commitment that Army leadership made to me personally and to the military families on post here, that they would inspect every single home on post. That's why I'm here today. Last year, I led an 8-month-long bipartisan investigation of housing conditions here at Fort Gordon and at other bases across the country and installations across the country where there's privatized housing. And what we found was consistent with the complaints that military families here have been raising for years. Widespread mistreatment of families living in privatized housing on post. And this matters because, first of all, we owe it to those who make tremendous sacrifices to serve that they have safe, healthy accommodation. I've got a 15-month-old baby daughter at home. I know how it is for these young families and young parents who have infant children or young kids in these homes. They cannot and should not have to fear that their child may be sickened by the housing they're living in on a U.S. Army installation. This also matters because this gets directly at the Army's ability to execute its mission in our national defense. Healthy soldiers who can focus on their mission instead of being distracted by distress about the conditions their family is living in are better able to defend our country. And we are better able to retain the exceptionally talented people in the Army when they and their families are treated right and they're living in safe, healthy housing. That's why this matters. That's why I launched that investigation last year. And that's why I've stayed focused on this. I demanded that the Army come and inspect every single home on post. They committed to do so, and they are doing so. And that's a positive sign. And that's why I came here today, to confirm that these home-by-home inspections are underway. They are underway. I appreciate the Army's commitment to do that. I appreciate that the Army is making good on their commitment to do that. But we've still got a long way to go and much work ahead of us to ensure that the housing here is up to standard and that Balfour Beatty, the company that is responsible for operating this housing, is fully responsive to the needs of those who live in it. So again, just to be absolutely clear about what's happening today, I've returned to Fort Gordon to personally ensure that the Army is making good on its commitment to inspect every single home on post. And I spent the day out at communities on post, personally witnessing those inspections happening. Those inspections are happening, and that's an encouraging sign. But we've still got a long way to go, and I'm going to remain focused on this issue and fully committed to holding the Army accountable and holding Balfour Beatty accountable to do right by the military families who live here.
And again, you were just hearing from Senator Jon Ossoff, who just wrapped a news conference following his visit to Fort Gordon today. And I want to expand a little on what he said about making sure that these inspections are happening at Fort Gordon. He demanded that these inspections happen, and today he was there to make sure that they're happening, but he was also witnessing some of them. He did mention today that he spent time with several families in their homes as these inspections were happening. So this isn't a situation where he just kind of popped in for a few minutes and saw what was happening. He was actually with the families when this was happening too. He also held a town hall meeting on post with about 40 or so families and members of the military, and just kind of spoke with them and got their feedback about the process and just a number of things that have been going on. So he's really spoken with a bunch of different families, and it's kind of in line with what he's been doing ever since he started this push. Again, he mentioned his 8-month-long investigation, and that was really the results of which were released just about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. The results were released right about the time of a hearing in Washington, D.C. The I-Team traveled to Washington, D.C. for that hearing. We were the only reporters there in that room with cameras rolling as the Balfour Beatty executives were testifying under oath, and some really disturbing details about living conditions were released. And what's really upsetting about those conditions that were released is that these are things that have been pointed out. These are things the I-Team has been uncovering for more than a decade, but these are things that were happening recently. So the Army went in and around 2019, when the housing crisis kind of hit this plateau, Congress did get involved and not a lot was done. But shortly after that, there were a couple of steps here or there, and the families felt like nothing was really ever getting done until the Department of Justice got involved and Balfour Beatty pleaded guilty to defrauding the U.S. government. That history is important to know because that's where Senator Jon Ossoff stepped in, and that's where the permanent Senate Investigations Committee stepped in and started their investigation. So when they started looking at the conditions these houses are in and these families are in, we're not talking about conditions that have been 5-10 years ago. He was looking at conditions that are happening now, and conditions that have happened since Balfour Beatty pleaded guilty to defrauding the U.S. government. So what we're doing now, and what the senator is doing now, is after the results of this investigation were released, the Army launched its own investigation into the housing conditions at Fort Gordon, specifically at Fort Gordon, suspended all of Balfour Beatty's bonus money that was being paid to Balfour Beatty there. And then Senator Ossoff demanded that these inspections happen. That what we're seeing now are the very first of these inspections happening. And these inspections aren't just happening at Fort Gordon, and they're not just happening with Balfour Beatty. They're happening at every U.S. military installation across the country. Fort Gordon is just the first to be inspected. And Fort Gordon is inspected first, unfortunately, because Fort Gordon has become somewhat of a poster child for bad military housing because of that hearing, that investigation that we just talked about in Washington, D.C. So where do we go from here? We could talk all day about the history, but what is happening today and beyond? Well, as you heard, the inspections are happening today, and this is not going to be a quick process. It's going to happen an estimated 4.5 weeks, about as long as it's going to take, but I mean, it could take even longer than that. Obviously, other installations looking to Fort Gordon, because we are the first where this is happening, so they're kind of getting an idea of how long it will take for them. What are they going to find? Well, that remains to be seen. We, for years, have uncovered problems with mold, electrical issues, but lately, from some of my sources that I've been talking to, some families there's been a lot of complaints about plumbing. We even have a video that a family has shared with us of just plumbing coming down through a ceiling of backed up sewage. I'm told that's a problem in a number of neighborhoods. And We've also had a lot of problems with the older houses, and it was something that I've heard as a reporter covering this for years that was really an excuse and an explanation. Well, we have a lot of old homes. We have a lot of homes that were built in the 50s. We have a lot of homes that were built in the 60s. They're called legacy homes. So we have a lot of legacy homes. Well, the last couple of investigative stories that we've done have exposed some problems in their newest neighborhood where their officers live and some of their older enlisted. So it's not just a problem anymore with their older homes. We have seen problems with their newer homes. So what are we looking at? Again, we could be looking at mold, which is we've seen. We could be looking at electrical problems, sewage problems, gas problems. These are all things that inspectors are looking for. But what is of particular interest, perhaps, is at the age of the homes. Are these just happening in the older homes, the legacy homes? Are these happening in the newer homes? Well, we've seen it in both. So it'll be interesting to see what the inspectors will find. Something interesting too, Senator Ossoff and his team obviously cannot be there for every single inspection at every single home, but they were there today, first of all, to make a statement that, hey, we're watching you, but they will be able to inspect the inspections. And what that means is their team will have access to the documents. They'll be able to look over what the inspectors find, what the inspectors don't find, and get an idea of what is happening in these homes. And that is what is so important here, because we have never really had a full picture of what is happening in these houses. Sure, we have heard from families telling us the problems that they have, but these are the families that have been brave enough to speak up. And I say brave because a lot of families are super afraid to speak out because they're worried about repercussions at work. But we've never had a fully comprehensive look at here's the situation at this house, at this house, at this house, at every single house on post. So what these inspections will do at every single housing unit is give us, it will give Senator Ossoff, it will give the Army, it will give the Department of Defense, it will give everyone with a position to do something about it, a clear picture of what they're looking at. So this is a huge step in the right direction. And I commend Senator Jon Ossoff for, first of all, demanding that this happen, and number two, securing these inspections, and then number three, for being here to oversee them and to make sure that they're happening. Because this is a clear message to these families who for so long have had hope and then have seen very little happen, that something is happening now. Someone is paying attention, and that what matters is their health and their safety, and that someone's paying attention to this. And so we, of course, will continue to pay attention to this as well. We will stay on top of this. We are still in touch with a lot of military families. Of course, we are in contact with Senator Ossoff's office. And again, though, a big step today at Fort Gordon as the first in the nation, unit by unit, inspections are happening.